Let's talk about fandoms. Fandoms have been around since before the invention of most modern technology and have changed significantly with the introduction of the internet and social media. However, they've come and gone with time, so many people have argued that they're irrelevant and not worth investing time into. But I disagree and have reason to believe that fandoms will continue to be a staple in society until humanity reaches its end. I'm sure if you're watching this video that you have probably also been in a lot of fandoms. A lot of my followers and friends have been in multiple fandoms for over 10 years, and fans are often really passionate about the thing that they like. Fandom refers to a community of people who are passionate about something, whether it's a film, a band, television, a book, or sports team. I'd like to expand on this by including content creators, fictional worlds, video games, things like that. Because of social media, the internet, and an increasing amount of social networks, people are able to discover groups that they're interested in a lot more easily and are able to connect with other people much easier than it used to be back when email and fax was the most advanced form of communication that we had. Back when Star Trek was huge, that was like the biggest fandom to be in. Millions watched Star Trek at the same time when it was broadcasted on TV. So it was huge. That was like the fandom. And then it became Star Wars. And then it became people like Elvis and bands like the Beatles. And then the internet came into place, and that divulged quite a bit because then all of a sudden there were a lot more things that people could know about to then be interested in. It's one of the things that's caused concern about disconnect of people with each other because there are very few shared interests now when you really think about it. One of the great things about fandoms is that it's given a lot of people a creative outlet to do things such as create fan art, fanimations, merch, cosplay, you name it. It exists. And because of things like that, and that there's pretty much a constant stream of content of whatever it may be being fed to the fans in a fandom, it's essentially a series of positive events. I found a really interesting article where the author said that being a fan is, for many people, a source of repeated positive experiences, and that it's even been compared to falling in love, which I think totally makes sense because it's like essentially a constant dopamine hit when something that you like a lot is released, especially then if it's like a single person, like a single artist or content creator, which it creates opportunities for a lot of parasocial experiences. That's how celebrities can end up with a lot of stalkers, because it's so similar to the falling in love experience that fans are just like, yep, this is my person that I need for the rest of my life. And one of the really special experiences about fandoms is that people often just fall into it. This psychologist from the University of Pennsylvania is like, this is how our brains are wired, get a lot of pleasure from indulging in the things that we love, and the intensity of those feelings is really reinforcing. And so then because there will be so many other fans for the same thing, it kind of reinforces and continuously validates the interest because there's other people with the same interest, which is really interesting because this video mentions how fans can even lack empathy for then other fans and other fandoms, despite more empathetic people being more prone to being a fan of something. But I think this video explains that concept pretty well.
Basically, empathy. In a 2013 study with a couple hundred participants, scientists found that subjects who read literary fiction with complex characters, as opposed to pop fiction with predictable characters, nonfiction, or nothing, scored higher in measures of affective theory of mind. How does this relate to fandom? Like I said, it makes things personal. When you're reading about Harry, Ron, and Hermione, you can step into their shoes and empathize with their fears, triumphs, and friendship. The wizarding world isn't real, but it feels real, and that's important. A study from 2015 involving a little over 2,000 participants found a bunch of different motivations for engaging in so-called geek culture. They found that people who are looking for a self-esteem boost or who are narcissistic seem to engage in geek culture to play out fantasies that aren't possible in real life. After all, you can't go smashing orcs around town. But you can in D&D. But these participants don't just isolate themselves in fantasy worlds. They seem to contribute to the real world in some ways too. The study found that many fans participate in civic activism, like self-help and nationality-related groups, although they seem to be less involved in political activism. Their research also supported what they called the belongingness hypothesis. That's the idea that people use common media, like Star Wars, to build communities and increase their sense of belonging. Another study surveying fantasy sports fans, anime fans, and furries found a similar trend, and found that people in different fandoms might have slightly different reasons for being fans. Their research found that people who were anime fans or furries were more likely to participate in their fandoms because it created a sense of belonging, which was less common in fantasy sports fans. The anime and furry communities tend to be ridiculed by society in ways that fantasy sports aren't. So the researchers concluded that fandoms can be a place where uncommon interests can be celebrated and shared. So fandoms can be great. They're a space where you can be enthusiastic with a whole community of like-minded people. But too much of any good thing can turn sour. If you become too attached to the characters or community of a fandom, it can become harder for you to feel empathy for other groups, like other fandoms or non-fans. There's a lot of psychological evidence that we feel more empathy for people who are in our communities than for people who are from different communities. And when it comes to competitive fandoms, like sports, there can be negative effects when things don't go our way. Like one 2013 study even found that football fans are more likely to make unhealthy food choices the day after their team lost a game. Depending on the nature of your fanaticism, psychologists have found that being a sports fan can be good for life satisfaction and self-esteem, called a harmonious passion, or it can make you kind of miserable by fostering frustration or hatred of non-fans, called an obsessive passion. So it's important to be able to step back and see your fandom as part of a larger whole, and not let these communities become your entire world.
Which is part of how they can become toxic. Fandoms are a very bittersweet thing, which is something that has been debated for a very long time. I think the oldest video I found about fandom is from 11 years ago. Which then discusses how fandoms have been around since 100 years ago. Like, fandoms have been around for a very long time. One of the things that goes along with being in a fandom, though, is that people become emotionally invested into it, which is why I think there's, like, evidence. I think there were a couple studies conducted about this where teenage girls tend to be the biggest participants in fan activity, because of the emotional aspect, where they're essentially better at emotionally expressing their interests, which is why fandoms are so important to the success of shows, music artists, games, companies. Having the fandom for literally anything is so important for it to become successful. Content creators regularly attribute a lot of their success to their fans, because for something to grow, fans are a huge part of spreading their interests. Ultimately, people want to connect with other people through their interests. So what better way to connect with someone else through an interest by making them also interested in that thing? For instance, BTS ARMY ended up sabotaging a Trump rally, making sure that like half of the stadium was empty by reserving seats, and then just not showing up. As of right now, there is a huge collaboration between I think like 30 to 34 different content creators to help raise money to support Palestine. And so that's millions of then followers and fans being united for this one purpose, and they're working on raising like up to $1 million, I believe, which is a crazy amount, and it is fantastic at how much progress they're making. Because fandoms are so powerful, companies kind of need them. And I highly suggest watching this entire video by Film Theory if you haven't already, because this says a lot about kind of the differences between like male and female play and very young kids. But this bit is most particularly prevalent to the importance of fandoms in just the existence of media as a whole.
See, in Hollywood, there's a concept known as toyetic media. This is any movie, cartoon, TV show, comic book, or whatever created for the purpose of advertising merchandise. It doesn't have to be the only purpose of the media, but a lot of decisions made in Hollywood are done so that the properties become more toyetic. A good example of this, during the pre-production of the 1990s film Batman and Robin, toy manufacturers sat in on creative meetings, and many parts of the movie were changed to be easier to make toys out of. And despite the film itself being a financial disappointment, the merchandise made enough money that Warner Brothers continued the Batman franchise with a reboot. However, the first huge property that really took advantage of this idea of toyetic media was Star Wars. Practically everything within the Star Wars franchise was designed in a way to let them very easily transfer to toys. And George Lucas was a savvy enough businessman to negotiate that he would keep the merchandising rights in lieu of a higher upfront paycheck. This is how Lucas made his billions. Not through the movies, through the toys. The movies were just a nice bonus on top. They were great films that happened to act as commercials for the action figures and plastic lightsabers, and other companies definitely took note of this. This led to a slew of toyetic IP being created for the sole purpose of selling merchandise, and a lot of the most popular franchises from the 80s and 90s fall into this exact category. I'm talking Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, He-Man, She-Ra, Pokemon, Digimon, even certified classics like Cowboy Bebop. All of them are made specifically to sell toys, games, trading cards, you name it, and not because they were the best stories to tell our kids. But
it worked so well. The amount of money that is generated from merch for any kind of media form is insane. And it makes sense when you think about, like, I am sure you watching this, you have bought merch before, which is part of why fandoms are then so profitable. They're gonna buy merch. They're gonna buy a lot of merch. They're gonna watch everything. They're gonna go through the ads, or they're gonna pay to not watch the ads, which at the end of the day, both things benefit the person who is creating whatever media that has the ads in it. However, because the merch is so profitable, companies do try to prevent fans from taking creative liberties with their IP. I think the company that has been most problematic with this has been Nintendo, where they constantly try and block people from really doing much of anything with their IP. And a lot of people make fun of it, but when you think about it from the financial standpoint of the big companies like that, well, they've got to make money. But at the end of the day, it's the creative media aspect of fandoms that is so important, and I would personally argue the most important. People tend to become a fan of something between their early teens to mid-20s and can stay in that fandom for 10 years or more. That's a really long time to be invested into something, especially during those essential developmental years when people are really figuring out who they are and what they want to do. I personally have had life-changing experiences with fandoms. Like, the reason that I'm doing what I am now is because 4 years ago, I discovered Minecraft YouTubers, and I watched the Dream SMP, and I watched the creators and what they were doing outside of the Dream SMP, and then I found other creators through them. And during that period of time, I not only subconsciously modeled my behavior, appearance after these people, but developed an interest in things like live streaming and making YouTube videos and gaming, when earlier in my childhood, I despised everything that went along with it because I watched the media that my younger brother watched, which I personally found unbearable. No offense to Unspeakable Gaming. Percy Jackson is another one where I read the Percy Jackson books, and I read the Magnus Chase, and I read Heroes of Olympus, and somewhere in one of my drawers I have clay beads that are unbaked and unpaintable and unusable right now, but they were modeled after the Camp Half-Blood leather cord necklaces, where it'd be a bead for every year. It's things like that where my behavior was very clearly altered by the fandom that I was in, which is why I think that it is so essential for human development, because having an interest in something quite literally changes how they act as a person, which, to go back to the film theory video, is why it's important to have characters in media, especially for young kids, that are good people, so that kids can model their behavior after actual good characters, because nobody wants to raise their kid to be an absolute menace to society in the worst way possible, but it does happen, and that's partly because of the media that they're exposed to. Which brings me to my next point: fandoms can become really bad because of this.
The good fans support each other in this collaborative community where they work together and build each other up. They're also pretty open-minded, as they don't mind non-fans watching or liking different things, as they are well aware that what they like isn't everyone's cup of tea. And on some occasions, they may request something they think would be nice, but also respects the rights of the creator to reject those suggestions and focus on their own creative direction. And while the good fans are like two people drinking tea and having a nice conversation at a cafe, the toxic fans are the opposite. They're like those people who chug 3 bottles of energy drinks and perform a rap battle just to see who's the loudest and most annoying person there. Toxic fans have a sense of entitlement, possessiveness, and superiority. They attack other fans as they feel like they are the only true fans and that the other fans or non-fans are just quote-unquote normies. They brag that they're special just because of the thing they like. They often treat any form of criticism for any show, movie, or any forms of entertainment as some personal insult and will often react very emotionally. There's a lot of controlling, nagging, harassment, and bullying that often targets young people as they haven't developed a full understanding of the world around them. And in some cases, they will often create huge demands to the creators, some of which are impossible to meet, and will send threats to those creators if those demands aren't met. And the final characteristic is that they are so caught up in their fandom from their obsessiveness, validation, and attention, if they have any validation and attention, that they'll stop caring about other people in the outside world, whether it's someone they've never met before or someone important, like a friend or a family member.
Which obviously becomes problematic. A lot of fandoms aren't interacted with because of that, because of how toxic the fans can get. The Dream SMP was one of those fandoms. It arose during the COVID time, so a lot of people were already stuck indoors in their own heads. So then when they're introduced to this story that they can take a lot of creative liberty in, it was very easy for it to become someone's entire world. Fans would find a character that they really intensely identified with, and then take that part of modeling themselves after a character that they liked a little bit too far, which would create a lot of emotional and aggressive responses, because when that character is then maybe interpreted differently, or someone says, hey, you know, I don't like what this certain character did, then the person identifying them with that character takes it as a personal attack, because that character is almost them. And then they feel personally attacked. Does that make sense? Somewhere else in Joseph's video, he mentions that when people identify so strongly with the character, they can become possessive and feel personally attacked when an alternate view is poised by someone in the fandom, which breeds aggression and stands. Because a lot of fandoms are built off of a story. It's, as mentioned before, that really lifelike story that people can empathize with. But there's also no one way to interpret a story. There's no right, there's no wrong. There might be some ways that make a bit more sense with the storyline, with the media. You know, it's how like FNAF is just a absolute maze of different possibilities, and yeah, there's some theories that fit better than others, but at the end of the day, they're all theories.
It's just a theory. A game theory.
People have been trained to think in a way that there is a right and there is a wrong, and that wrong equals stupid, and no one wants to be stupid. So when someone has a view or an opinion of something in their fandom that is then challenged by someone else, it can be interpreted as then saying, you're wrong. And no one wants to be wrong, but it happens. And there's no right or wrong in this. So it's like they're not even wrong in the first place. But along with the strong identification with a character, that often makes a fandom someone's safe space. And when that safe space is then interpreted with an opposing view, people can feel like their safe spaces are being invaded, which also leads to then the aggressive and possessive tendencies. This Sin Squad video, I highly recommend that you watch the entire thing, especially if you're also curious about why fandoms are so toxic. But one of my favorite quotes from it is, "Nothing I don't like can be in my safe space," which then breeds aggressive behavior, and internet purity crusaders, which is a whole separate thing. Comment if you want a whole separate video on how parents can expect the internet to be cleansed, because at the end of the day, as Sin Squad says, the internet is a godless wasteland full of porn, and it is impossible to give your 5-year-old an iPad with open internet access and then expect nothing to happen. But that's a whole separate thing, and that's a whole separate problems that certain fans have. But the Sin Squad video, this is a really good video.
How did we go from an era where live and let live and don't like, don't read were the maxims of fandom spaces to now? Hey, Sonny, you get the news? Apparently, we can't ship Entrapta with anyone anymore because she's child-coded.
It blows my mind that people can see characters who are just full-blown adults and say that they act too much like a child to ship with anyone, yet at the same time they'll turn around and take a character that looks like an 8-year-old child and be like, oh, she's actually 1,000 years old though, so it's okay to have a body pillow of her. Because that makes perfect sense and isn't weird at all. But one of the other things that Sin Squad said that I think really everyone should hear and think about and consider when they think about things that they don't like is that uncomfortable does not equal bad. Because certain things will be uncomfortable for some people, but not for other people. Like, a lot of people can't handle blood and gore. I personally, huge fan of it. Gosh, I'd love to watch someone's face get smashed in a movie. It's fantastic. It's riveting. But that doesn't mean it's bad, because, you know, it might make my cousin uncomfortable, and they might want to leave the room, and that's chill, or watch something else, you know, stuff like that, where the internet cannot be baby-proofed. At the end of the day, people need to accept that fandoms aren't their safe space, they can't own it, they can't be possessive about it, the character or person isn't them, and that it can't be baby-proof and white-padded so that it fits the exact box, the exact mold that they want it to be in, because there's over 8 billion people on this planet. Not everyone's gonna think the same thing. Everyone's gonna have a different opinion and idea about everything, and at the end of the day, you are not going to find 2 people with the exact same opinions about everything. That's not happening. If you think you know someone who has the exact same opinions as you about everything, then either you're lying to yourself or they're lying to you. One of the big questions I want to pose that I do actually want you guys to comment about, and or just think about, just mull it over a little bit, is whether toxic fans should be considered actual fans. I found this question posed in one of the videos during research that I think is a fantastic video, where it's talking about the problems of toxic fans, and just listen to this. Let me know what your thoughts are.
Role in defining fandom. On some level, the answer to the question, are toxic fans still fans, is only if we consider them to be. As fans, we ourselves are responsible for determining the ongoing meaning of this label. And we are a community. No matter who you ask, scholars, less academic writers, or fans themselves, the communal aspect of fandom is essential. Even in early fandom studies, fandom was understood as more than the mere act of being a fan of something. It was seen as a collective strategy to form interpretative communities. Stepping away from scholarship, remember Starlight's definition. Fandom isn't just the liking, it's when a community forms around the liking. Or look at the answers my followers gave. These two included the idea of joining a community, or sharing your experiences. Check out Francesca Copper's A Brief History of Media Fandom for more on this, but in a nutshell, the birth of modern media fandom was a community of people taking seriously something that was seen as disposable. They thought it was good, maybe they thought it was bad, but they thought it was worth discussing, and essentially worth discussing together. The introduction to the second edition of Fandom, Identities and Communities in a Mediated World, concludes with the following. In an era in which traditional markers of identity in high modernity such as employment, class, marriage, and national belonging, but also age, religion, sexuality, and gender are increasingly unstable, fluid, and on occasion ephemeral, the imagined but voluntary communities we join through fan attachments are as important as the self-identity that is constructed and narrated by fans individually. Fandom, at its core, is community. And I think that's the strongest argument for why we maybe shouldn't consider those responsible for spreading toxicity real fans, even if they claim to be, even if they regularly consume these products in an emotionally involved way. Because toxicity, bullying, bad faith, intolerance, these are qualities antithetical to community, and if they're working against the very foundations of fandom, are they really a part of it?
I feel bad for the aggressive-looking stock image guy who is used so many times talking about toxic fans, but the point that he's making stands nonetheless, where should toxic fans be actually considered fans because not only do they not want to partake in any kind of conversation because any view other than their view is bad view, they don't want to interact as part of a healthy community. In this MarketCast article, with 5 reasons why brands need fandoms, one of the big points is that fandom is about love. It's about connecting. It's about being a fan of something. I love nothing more than going to a concert because I know that every single person in that building, except for maybe some parents, are a fan of the band, and that's why they're there, because they like the band. They like maybe multiple bands, but they are all there under the sole reason of seeing that one group, that one person perform, and that is unity that is beautiful. And toxic fans don't really participate in that. So should they really be considered fans? Because in a sense, that's almost normalizing then the rise of toxicity and the existence of it inside a fandom. So that's just a little thing to think about, because I definitely think that we've normalized the idea of toxic fans too much. Like, you're not really even being a fan at that point. You're just being aggressively possessive about something or someone that doesn't belong to you. And that's just toxic in general. You know, like that's like a toxic partner. They're saying they love you, but do they actually display that they do? Or, you know, are they saying that they love you and then won't let you leave the house or have conversations with other people or express any of your thoughts and opinions? That's just a toxic and abusive partner. So then why are we letting these people who then say they're fans of something pretty much do the exact same thing and then still refer to them as fans? That seems kind of messed up. Despite all the negatives, though, there are a lot of positives with fandoms, and I think at the end of the day, those are going to override the negatives because they're so essential to things like human development, like community, like personality development. And also money. Companies really like money, and as long as fandoms still generate money for companies, they will definitely be around. As I've mentioned before, not everyone's going to be interested in the same thing. Not everyone's going to have the same perspective about something. But it's at least a way to connect to a few other people, and more often than not, that's enough. The existence of the internet allows these communities to exist so much more prevalently and allows them to thrive in a way that they couldn't 50 years ago. Granted, 50 years ago, there were fandoms, but it was more of like a top 5 that people were interested in. But now there's a whole slew of additional things that you could be interested in, you can talk to other people about being interested in, and I think that's really cool. With fandoms, at the end of the day, people get to look forward to watching a new episode, or listening to a new song, or watching a new movie, or even a new video release. It just makes their day a little bit better than it was before, and people crave that dopamine release. So to conclude, fandoms will be around forever. We are never escaping them, and we're either going to have to stop calling toxic fans fans, or we're just gonna have to eject them from the general community. I hope you all enjoy it. Also, this is Pebble. She's my new bird, and she will occasionally fly onto my head. I hope you enjoy it, and comment your thoughts, and if you want me to make any additional videos about the stuff that I mentioned. I will be doing weekly uploads every week over the summer. We'll see how it goes. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.